Hey, good morning, y'all. Joshua Severe Weather. Happy Monday and happy May to you. And there was so much weather in the last week with severe weather down south that I didn't really have a chance to look too much into the future, but I'm going to attempt to do that today. We're going to talk about what's going to be a very difficult and challenging forecast for the month of May, but one that I think could see a much above average amount of variability than what you would typically see in May. What does that mean? That means things can get drastic in a hurry here. Typically, we get big pattern flips in the winter. We get them in the spring all the time. As we head into the month of May, these drastic changes in temperature and storm patterns typically start to kind of lower in variance. What that means is we don't see as much drastic weather change in the month of May. However, things are very drastic, as I'm about to show you guys here. And if you're watching me from the Great Lakes, you know exactly what I'm talking about. We just had a massive storm move up the East Coast, flooding rain across the Northeast and New England, tornadoes in parts of Florida and Virginia, severe weather in the Carolinas. And that was just in the weekend alone. Before it, big time weather down in Texas, big time hail in Florida. That is very rare. It does happen this time of the year, don't get me wrong, but I believe we are going to see a very cold start to the month of May in the eastern US, but the potential for these forecasts that we're looking at for the next 31 days to actually end up busting too cold. We may warm up very quickly and have some early summer-like heat towards the end of the month. And I'm going to go into the drivers for that here. Here's the water vapor imagery, and you can see our big nor'easter type storm, which is now kind of backing into the Great Lakes. We had a storm come up the East Coast that produced the severe weather in North Carolina, Virginia yesterday, and Florida yesterday morning. A lot of dry air aloft behind it, so this trough that has moved through the Great Lakes has phased with our East Coast storm, and that is going to produce a very slow moving, kind of pain in the butt type storm over the Great Lakes and Northeast over the next few days, Eastern Canada as well. And I'm going to talk about what that's going to mean. In the meantime, we've got a massive trough that is trying to slide into California and put the heat wave we had the last few days to rest here. However, it's running into what we call an omega block. The Greek letter omega kind of looks like a huge curvy mountain in the middle of two deep valleys. And you can see that big ridge centered over kind of the high plains and Rockies here. It's not going to budge very much. So because of that, the threat for this storm system here to plow into the west and produce a big severe weather outbreak later this week does not look like it's going to happen. So storm chasers are kind of lamenting this because we've got kind of a quiet period where the year looked like it was going to be very active with severe weather, and I think overall that is still going to be the case, but things have gone a bit put on pause for the time being. Now, is it going to last that way all May? I definitely don't think so. Climatology certainly doesn't favor that. And you can see on our watch and warning map, really no severe weather aside from some flooding over parts of New England, flood warnings in parts of down east Maine, or actually southwestern Maine, and a rare winter storm, not really rare considering how it's been in April, but a pretty big, for this magnitude, winter storm over northern upper Michigan and parts of Wisconsin, and some freeze warnings over parts of the Central Plains. Meanwhile, the West is still very warm away from the coast, and that will continue to bring us some flooding problems as the snowpack continues to melt rapidly here in the interior of the West. Here was yesterday's storm reports. Sorry, I'm going to get my words untied here. And we saw quite a bit of wind damage over the Carolinas and into southeastern Virginia. There was a reported tornado in Virginia Beach. I'm going to show you that in a minute. But surprisingly, the Storm Prediction Center did talk about issuing a watch, and they never did. And it doesn't really, to me, make sense, but I'm not going to criticize them either. They're doing a role for us. But there was definitely grounds for what should have been a severe thunderstorm watch yesterday afternoon as we got into the warm sector. We did have a pretty decent sized tornado, an EF2 here, according to Weather Track US, in Palm Beach Gardens over to about Juno Beach here. Managed to avoid the golf courses. We have many of them here in Florida, but definitely in Palm Beach County, an EF2 tornado, which caused quite a bit of damage. And then yesterday, we're going to see storm surveys, but a brief but intense tornado touchdown in the Great Neck area of Virginia Beach right before 6 o'clock yesterday. And that storm track had a map up here, but I don't know where it went. Produced quite a bit of damage in the Great Neck area, and also some multi-million-dollar homes got hit. So my thoughts and prayers go out to everybody affected by these tornadoes. No matter what your income level, this kind of a storm certainly causes damage, changes lives, and we're fortunate to hear that there are not any fatalities that I could tell, but there were some injuries with trees coming down onto cars. So storms can develop very rapidly and cause problems in just a short order. That's what happened here. We had kind of a very small scale event, but it was intense. Probably going to see EF2 tornado damage, possibly even EF3. But this occurred right in the Great Neck area, very close to Cox High School and Great Neck Middle School. So yeah, very intense, and my thoughts and prayers go out to everybody involved. Now, the next few days look pretty quiet for severe weather. As we get to the middle of the week, then we start to see a storm over the southern plains, which has not been very well modeled, but does produce a 15% area here on the dry line from central Texas up in the west central Oklahoma. And staying west of the 35 corridor this time, that area has been battered over the last couple of weeks, but we do have to watch out for a few tornadoes and large hail stones here as we get into Thursday afternoon. But overall, not a huge week for severe weather. Fortunately, we get to kind of catch our breath. The reason why is this massive storm in the east is going to continue to spin through and just kind of stall out over Lake Huron. And we're going to see snow falling in over 10 states of the U.S. and in 4 provinces of Canada here for the first 4 days of May. Pretty intense. This storm system is still going to be in our hair until Friday. The upper low just doesn't really move out until the weekend, but things are looking much more optimistic here for the upcoming weekend, we think, over the eastern United States. It'll be kind of cool, but we are going to see more in the way of sun. And finally, we can get through a weekend, I believe, without any significant precipitation over the Great Lakes region and the Northeast. The Mid-Atlantic probably going to be okay. We're watching a storm over the Southeast. I do think we are going to see a few heavier storms moving across Kentuckiana, the Tennessee Valley, Friday night into Saturday morning. And it could be a wet start to the weekend over the Western Carolinas, Northern Georgia, which I know you don't want to hear because we've had, 15 weekends in a row with some form of rain. But the good news is that this weekend storm that's coming eastward is going to hit this trough and kind of get squeezed out. And instead of a major storm with severe weather and flooding rain, we're just dealing with a more local event versus a huge regional event. So we will take what we can get at this point. And if you are in the Great Lakes, you're seeing that snow big time over Michigan, and then also over the West Virginia, Pennsylvania mountains, even Ohio. Over the next 48 hours, we're going to see some pretty significant snow coming down. A lot of this probably won't stick, except in the UP of Michigan and in the snowshoe area of West Virginia. You see a lot more that falls that actually sticks. We've been seeing flakes falling all overnight across western North Carolina, but really not much accumulation. That could change, though, here this morning, Monday morning here. But we still see snow in the forecast right through about Thursday before things quiet down. The National Weather Service in Marquette, Michigan, has a 6 to 18-inch forecast around the Marquette, Michigan area on top of what we've already had. Very heavy wet snow with wind gusts as high as 45 miles per hour. This could create local blizzard conditions in some areas, especially the higher ground to the southeast of Lance and to the west and northwest of Negaunee. And I apologize, I really am not great with some of these names. So if you're in Upper Michigan and you're watching, please let me know how to pronounce them, and I will do my best to correct them. But chances are you're trapped and you're going to be dealing with some power outages and strong winds over the next 2 days, along with some pretty incredible snowfall totals. Here's what the European is dumping here on the UP of Michigan. And this is pretty remarkable to see in May. Is it unheard of? No. But could we see a record snow? Certainly. I mean, 36 inches being spit out by the European model here over the next 48 hours just to the west of Marquette. Even on the lakeshore, amounts of 12 to 18 inches are going to be possible. The Keweenaw Peninsula will see less because it's a little bit too warm for a lot of that to stick, but certainly an area that could see between 3 and 6 inches of accumulating snow. Farther to the south and east, the Green Bay area has seen a little bit of snow. We're seeing it all the way down to about Sheboygan, even some flakes possible in Milwaukee, especially on the north side of town. We're also going to see here as we get into tonight and into early tomorrow, maybe a few inches downwind of Lake Michigan, 6 to 7 inches east of Traverse City. This includes places like Cadillac. We could see even small accumulations all the way down to Grand Rapids, Kalamazoo, and Lansing. A lot of this is not going to stick to the grass, but it's still going to obviously create that big snow globe effect that you see with winter storms that produce wet snowflakes. So very high or very low ratios of accumulation here, but certainly something that we are kind of getting sick of here. I know in the east, we wanted to see bigger winter, and the areas that got all the snow are still getting it, and the areas that didn't are not getting it. And it's May, so it's time to move on anyway. But we see in the Laurel Highlands potentially up to 5-6 inches of new snow, and even into western Maryland here, south of Frostburg, southwest of Frostburg, the potential for over a foot of fresh snow. Even on the Erie Lakeshore in Chautauqua County and northeastern Erie County, the potential to see a few inches of fresh accumulating snow. Farther off to the south and east, the Appalachians are going to pick up snow. Outside of them, we're not. But over the next, say, 48 hours, we could see up to 18 inches, maybe even 20 inches of snow in the snowshoe area. When you get back, though, to I-77 and 79, we're probably not going to see accumulation, but we could see some flakes falling here between Bluefield and Beckley. So a little bit of accumulation here. Also, same for parts of Ashe and Watauga counties and Avery County here in North Carolina. But again, probably very little would accumulate below, say, 5,000 feet. All right, so we're not going to ignore you guys in New England either. Mount Washington takes the cake for the worst weather. We had freezing rain yesterday morning as that storm came up the East Coast. Now we're going to see some accumulating snow across the presidential range. This model grid point isn't great. It says 2 inches, but I bet there'll be a lot more. Northern Maine also potentially an inch or so of snow. I don't know why Pivotal Weather does this with Canada. It's like there's no borders. But I will show you guys the centimeters here to give you a kind of a handle on what's expected. North central parts of Ontario are going to see over 20 centimeters of fresh snow. Also, parts of far eastern and southern Quebec are going to see potentially 10 to 20 centimeters. Even northern parts of New Brunswick, PEI, and the far northeastern tip of Nova Scotia could see a few centimeters of fresh accumulating snow. Here's a look at the GFS model. You see the storm continuing to spin and gyrate here over the eastern U.S., and we may see a surface low form off the coast, but that is moving away here on Thursday. Out west, we see our storm as well in California, going to bring some more accumulating snow to places like Tahoe and Truckee. And these higher elevations will see maybe another foot of accumulating snow as we get into tomorrow and tomorrow night, winding down on Wednesday. This low is going to drop south. LA could see just a little bit of rain and drizzle here on Wednesday. We see the heat breaking down, though, across the Pac Northwest. We had 80s and 90s in here over the weekend. Those temps will drop to the 60s and 70s for most. And we're looking at primarily liquid precipitation. But this storm, again, gets caught up in the block. Eventually, it makes some progress into Thursday afternoon and night, and that's when we could see this severe weather, primarily across this zone of Texas and Oklahoma, maybe some hail as well over parts of southwestern Kansas, and we could see some thunderstorms over eastern Wyoming and the panhandle of Nebraska, where we do need some rainfall as this low ejects east-southeastward. Rain will move in on Friday to the Tennessee Valley, parts of Louisiana and Mississippi, could see a few thunderstorms. And according to the GFS, this is primarily going to move away from the Carolinas and be around the central Gulf states this upcoming weekend. Florida could see a few thunderstorms as well, but the heavier amounts are going to be to the west of Florida across Alabama, Mississippi, Louisiana, and Arkansas. So things have shifted here finally, where the East sees a pretty decent end to the weekend, where our stormy weather is setting up over the central time zone and parts of the Northwest. As we get beyond this, the GFS really doesn't look any more reliable. We see all kinds of uncertainty from model run to model run. I do think we'll have some weather back into the eastern U.S. here at some point here towards the middle of May. We could have a couple of storms. We could very well still have some winter weather over eastern Canada. But again, the progress of this is going to be very uncertain. Could it be out of here by the 17th? Absolutely. Could it be longer to stick around? Sure. But the main thing I want you all to focus on is that these red lines here do expand eastward, and we do see a warm up coming for the middle of May. Here's the ensembles, which I think overall are going to give you a better feel for what to expect. This is the upper level pattern. We see the trough in the east does eventually get eaten up. It's still lingering over eastern Canada. We've got the lack of a Greenland block here, so the negative NAO starts to weaken, and that allows us to kind of progress and form a more positive NAO, which is going to mean more higher latitude ridging. And that will, of course, mean storm systems are going to move along more quickly. They're not going to get blocked anymore. It'll also allow the warm air in the west to eventually come up and over this ridge into the northeast. So as we get to the middle of May, we definitely see a warm-up coming, a pretty big pattern flip coming, but some of the ensembles continue to keep this pesky trough over New England, meaning it could warm up nicely over the southeast and the Great Lakes, and we get rid of this winter weather pattern. But if you're in New England and eastern Canada, you may still be stuck with some pretty yucky weather here for mid to late May. So the big pattern flip comes for some, but it does not come for absolutely everybody, unfortunately. We also see this troughing in the west. That could, of course, bring us yet another active stretch of weather over the plains. And that could include some stronger tornadoes here around May 20th and on in places like Oklahoma, northern Texas, Kansas, eastern Colorado. Basically, the traditional tornado alley I would be watching for. But we'll have to keep an eye on disturbances that are going to move through this into the Tennessee Valley and the southeast as well through the end of May. Typically in the Carolinas, we get a lot of severe weather in May. I think that can happen. It's just going to be a couple more weeks before we get to that point. All right, here's a look at the extended GFS ensembles. You can see temperatures this upcoming week will be as much as 15 degrees below average over the Ohio Valley and into the Great Lakes. But this cold does lessen some as we get into the second week of May, and we still are slightly below average, but we're trending closer to average. You can see in the north central U.S., which has been so cold over the last 10 to 20 days, we flipped to a much warmer weather pattern. That's that big pattern flip I'm talking about here. And I do think it is going to flip east here. We see below average temperatures on the GFS ensemble. However, I tend to think here with the fact that the ensembles are pushing this milder air eastward that we're going to see a lot of this cool air wiped out. And looking at one model is not going to give us the best forecast. I think we're eventually going to end up above average here towards Memorial Day for basically everybody in the east except maybe northern New England. There it could still remain below average. So the flip is definitely going to be with us. And this cold air is going to come under, the warm air is going to go up and over, and I do think we end up warmer than average for a little bit more of an extended period after, say, about May 24th. All right, so getting back to the precipitation forecast from the GFS, and you all can see, yeah, it's been wet across New England. However, let me give you a 7-day instead of a 30-day. However, we do see a drier pattern taking over here around the middle of May across much of the Northeast, and a wetter pattern over Texas and the Gulf Coast states. And when you see wetness on the Gulf and warmer waters, we now have to start asking ourselves, are we going to see something here named before the end of the month of May? And I think that is possible, but looking at the rainfall forecast alone is not going to give us the answer to that question. We have to look at a lot more, and I am going to kind of take you through that here in just a little bit. The European does still show us below average temperatures through the month of May. However, I think a lot of that is the first half of the month of May, and then we start to warm up here later in May. Again, the models are trying to go chilly here, but I don't necessarily buy into that. I'm going to show you guys why. They're also going pretty dry here over the southeast. The European says, aside from South Texas and the Western Atlantic, we're actually going to be below average on precipitation. I don't necessarily buy into that, but when you see this kind of dry, that usually means we have a strengthening high pressure ridge. And what that means is underneath it, we've got to keep an eye on the tropics as well. Not really going to spend a lot of time on teleconnections, but I do want to show you guys how the sea surface temperatures have changed. And as we head to an El Nino, we have actually seen cooling across the Gulf of Mexico. I know this is a little bit tough to see, so let me blow it up for you. But overall, we've seen cooling here off the Atlantic coast, but we've seen warming over the main development region. So the tropical season certainly could get kicked off a little bit earlier than we're used to. And overall, we still have a warm Atlantic Ocean here. Here's a look at the overall departures. We're still above average over the most of the Gulf, most of the southwestern Atlantic, even off of the New England coastline and across the main development region, which is not uncommon for El Nino. You can see the cooling here, but warming over the central Pacific and especially off of the coastline of South America. So definitely an El Nino taking over here, and the water temperatures, while they may be warm, will be countered by the effects of El Nino in the Atlantic. We will see increased wind shear overall across the entire basin. However, the intensity of that and how much wind shear we see can differ. And as it does, we see a very challenging tropical season forecast coming up. And remember, it only takes one storm. Don't want to make you sound, don't want to dumb it down for you, but if we have a period where the wind shear is relaxed for a little bit and the waters are warm, then we could see a rapidly intensifying storm near the Gulf Coast or near the Southeast Atlantic coast. So that is definitely still on the table. I'm going to learn to talk, I promise. But one thing we do like to look at is the MJO forecast. Madden-Julian oscillation shows you how pulses of activity in the tropics kind of emerge and how they track. And we have been kind of in a cold phase, which is why it's been so chilly over the eastern United States. Looking here on the map, we see that we've been kind of in this colder phase, but in the tropics, so in the tropics, we typically see a lot of action when we get into kind of phases 8 and 1. So that's where we were. We're in a cold phase in the east, but we come full circle here back towards 8 at the end of the month of May. On the 27th is at phase 7, but eventually it gets to phase 8 towards the very end of the month of May. So Memorial Day weekend, the tropics could certainly pick up. If you look at the upper level 200 millibar forecast, I'm going to simplify this for you and tell you the warmer colors are upper level convergence. That is unfavorable for storms to form. You see convergence, and that means the air sinks. When you see divergence, these are the greener colors. You see the air spreading out and thunderstorms are allowed to grow. So this is the analysis for now, and we see a very unfavorable pattern around the Atlantic. But as we head towards the middle of May, it starts getting a little bit more favorable across the Pacific around May 20th, and eventually to about the 25th and 30th of May, we see a more favorable pattern. So I showed you that wetness over the Caribbean and the Southern Gulf. I would say around Memorial Day weekend, we should keep our eyes on the closer to the Gulf Coast here for potential tropical activity. But as with everything, that level of certainty is very low. So I'm not going to go out on a limb and say we'll definitely have something, but that's what I'm watching over the next 4 to 5 weeks. Thank you so much for your time today. I really appreciate you. If you could subscribe to my channel, I would appreciate that as well. Share with your friends, feel free to comment as well. And those of you who have been watching me for the last several months understand that I'm driven to do this because of my calling from God. I want to give all the glory to God who allows me to do this every day. As a Christian, I believe that I'm here to serve in a big way. I believe that it's important to share what's important to me, and that is 1 John 4 and 5, for everyone born of God overcomes the world. This is the victory that has overcome the world, even our faith. Who is it that overcomes the world? Only the one who believes that Jesus is the Son of God. And basically what that says is it's very easy to let the world win and to lose every day in life. It's very easy to say, this causes this. This is where I am. This is why I got here. This is the uncertainty that is with me. But because our Lord and Savior Jesus Christ was sacrificed for us, we have been given the ability to overcome those negative forces if we choose the faithful path. If you're not a faithful believer, again, I'm not here to criticize that. I'm just here to share what that has done for me. It's given me the belief that what I'm doing every day matters. What you do every day matters. And you have that choice to accept the gift of that faith. You have the choice to overcome the world through the word of God. And I'm going to overcome my tongue twistiness today. And I'm going to ask God just to help me have a very victorious week. And I really pray that he does the same for you. I'm here to support you and to lift you up, because I know as a body of believers, we can uplift each other. So I want to pray for you if you have any prayer requests. I hope you all have a wonderful start to your month of May, and I look forward to chatting with you again in the morning. God bless you.